Hello and welcome once again to the Liberty Ginger podcast. I am your host, Mike Ursery, and this is episode number 10. First of all, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I will not have an episode for you next week. I will be celebrating the holidays, and I will not be doing any recording, but I will be back the week after. So I want to begin by wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, a very safe holiday season, a very safe New Year's. If you go out for New Year's Eve, I ask that you make good decisions, be responsible, no drinking and driving or anything like that. Go out, have fun, do all those things, but at the same time, be safe, be responsible. And as we're celebrating this holiday season, it is a reminder that the year is almost over. Yes, 2018, the year when so many things happened, so many times we were shaking our head, we were face palming and just wondering what the heck is going on this year. This year is finally coming to an end, but 2018 is going out with a flurry of headlines, folks. So many things happening this week. The government might have a partial shutdown, but don't worry, they're still going to collect our taxes, so don't get your hopes up. Even though this is a quote-unquote partial shutdown, it's really, seeing how government shutdowns have gone in the past, this is more theater than anything else. Yes, there are parts of the government that still are not funded, and yes, they had a deadline that was pushed to December 21st to get those parts of the government funded, or the government does a partial shutdown. And the whole controversy over keeping the government, or over getting these parts of the government funded to include the Department of Homeland Security, was that there needed to be funding for the wall. Well, at the beginning of the week, Donald Trump said that he was going to back down from asking for that wall funding, and he was going to sign a spending bill to keep the government open. And he said that he was going to explore other avenues, meaning looking at taking money from other federal agencies to get the funding for the wall and get the wall built like he promised his base. Well, that changed later in the week because all of a sudden funding for the wall was back on the table. After saying that he would keep the government open and not have this dispute over wall funding, all of a sudden, I don't know what it was. I don't know if maybe his advisors got to him. I don't know. Well, I guess maybe got to him is the wrong way to put it, but maybe his advisors maybe advised him that he should stay the course as far as getting the wall. I'm not sure what happened, but all of a sudden, the funding for the wall was back on the table and he was demanding it. Bear in mind that Trump had that meeting with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi either last week or the week before, where he said that he would shut down the government if he couldn't get his funding for the wall. He had a meeting with the top Democrat in both the House and the Senate, and they got into all those arguments, and there were so many things said, so many cheap shots made at each other, and then you have Donald Trump saying, well, I'll just shut down the government. All of a sudden, he walked that back and said that he would forego demanding funding for the wall, and then he would find other avenues to get the wall built. And then all of a sudden, it's as if he never said that. All of a sudden, he was demanding wall funding towards the end. On Thursday, December 20th, the House of Representatives passed a spending bill that included $5.8 billion for the wall. Does anyone know exactly how much the wall is going to cost? Because of all the news reports I've seen about what the wall is going to cost, I've seen $5 billion, I've seen $10 billion, I've seen $25 billion. Exactly how much is it going to cost? And if it's not going to cost $5.8 billion, why are you even doing this? Because the Democrats are going to take the House in January. If there's more funding that's needed to complete the wall, they're not going to give that to him. They are not going to agree to that spending bill or whatever spending bill is necessary that needs to be passed to complete that wall funding. That same bill went to the Senate on Friday, and as of Friday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, no agreement had been reached, no vote had been made in the Senate to get the necessary votes needed to pass that through, because Trump would need 60 votes in the Senate, which there's no way he's going to get. First of all, there's not enough Republicans. There are not 60 Republicans in the Senate. Even if there were, you have Republicans like Jeff Flake who opposes the wall. There are other Republicans in the Senate who oppose the wall, and they're not going to vote for it. Well, Friday morning, Donald Trump was asking Mitch McConnell to invoke the nuclear option, meaning getting the bill through without 60 votes, just a majority. A majority of people in the Senate would have voted for it, but he was asking, but as of 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there's no nuclear option, there's no agreement. They had until midnight Eastern Standard Time Saturday morning. That was when the government would be officially shut down. And then they would take that shutdown into the holiday season. Now, as I sit here and record this podcast, the government is still open. It's 5:03 p.m. Central Standard Time. The government is not closed just yet. But if there is a government shutdown, now, by the time you're listening to this episode, you will already know if there is or if there isn't a government shutdown, but I can't see into the future. I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm doing the best that I can here. The areas of the government that would be affected by this government shutdown, they're saying that 1/4 of the government would be shut down. And this is the parts of the government that are not funded yet. These are the departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Justice, Homeland Security, Interior, State, Transportation, Treasury and Housing and Urban Development, as well as several smaller agencies. This is according to King5.com. This is a local news affiliate out of Seattle, Washington. And with Friday being December 21st and with the government officially shutting down at the start of December 22nd, Saturday morning, do you really think they're going to stay over the Christmas holiday, get this sorted out, settle their differences, and reopen the government? Of course not. Of course they're not. There were reports that there were some people in Congress who were complaining because they had to show up and do their jobs on December 21st. They didn't get to leave early that Friday and go off and start their holiday season early. Never mind the fact that there are people who work December 21st. There are people who are working through the weekend before Christmas, and there are even people who work over Christmas, but God forbid that Congress has to stay all day on a weekday, on a Friday, to do their jobs. God forbid. These people really do live inside a bubble, all those people in Washington, D.C. They really do live in a bubble. So if this agreement is reached and the government does in fact shut down, Christmas dinner in households across the country should be more interesting than usual if the discussions turn to politics, because now they're going to talk about who to blame for this government shutdown. Do you not blame the Democrats for not giving Trump his way because Trump is blaming the Democrats? Or do you blame Trump for drawing his line in the sand and saying, if you don't give me this funding, I'm going to shut down the government? This is what the holiday season of 2018 will probably be more memorable than most holiday seasons for households across the United States. So there's that to look forward to. And then something else to look forward to for anyone who is going to be joining Congress for the first time in January. What you have to look forward to is you are going to be sworn in, and then your first task is going to be to reopen the government. Your first task will be to get a spending bill on the president's desk that either he can sign or you get it pushed through in some other way, such as overriding his veto, which isn't going to happen. But still, there are ways to override a veto, but don't expect that to happen. I don't know why I'm bringing that up. Don't expect that to happen at all. But for everyone who's joining Congress, swearing in for the first time on January 3rd, this is what you have to look forward to. Reopening the government. And with this GOP supermajority coming to an end in these final days of 2018, and then the Democrats taking control of the House at the start of 2019, who knows how long this partial shutdown is going to go on for. But don't worry, they're still going to collect your taxes, so it's really not like the government is completely shutting down, first off. Second of all, the government shutting down isn't going to affect people that much individually. The government has shut down before and has not affected people that much individually. Do you remember during Obama's presidency, whenever the government shut down, and really the only thing that happened was they said that people could not take White House tours, and then they were putting barricades in front of memorials saying that people were not allowed to visit them because the government was shut down? That was all over the news when it was happening, and that was like the worst thing of that government shutdown. You know, first of all, the government shutting down is not going to affect you, so you should not worry. But even if the government shutting down is going to affect you, you definitely should be worried, because if the government shutting down has a drastic effect on an individual, the government is too big and way too involved and needs to be scaled back. And of course, there is the case of some federal jobs being furloughed or people not being allowed to show up to work and collect a paycheck. I don't know what to tell you about that. Perhaps maybe find a different line of work if your job hinges on people in agreement with each other to fund certain parts of the government. Elsewhere in the news, the Marines have decided that they have had enough and they are leaving the Trump administration. The Marines I'm talking about are Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, and John Kelly, Donald Trump's chief of staff in the White House. Both are Marine generals, and both are leaving the administration. John Kelly leaving after the first of the year. Jim Mattis making the announcement this week that he is going to retire at the end of February. Both coming at a big surprise. Mattis's announcement came after Trump announced that he was going to pull troops out of Syria. He said that the United States is leaving Syria, and he's also talked about the idea of pulling us out of Afghanistan, in which I say, yes, get us out of Afghanistan. We've been there for 17 years. If we haven't accomplished what we set out to accomplish by now, we're never going to do it. It should not have taken this long to do what we set out to do in Afghanistan. So much money spent, so many lives lost, and we are still there. You know, if the war in Afghanistan were a person, next year they would be old enough to enlist and go fight the war in Afghanistan. There is no reason for us to be occupying Afghanistan as long as we have. So to that I say, yes, Mr. President, please pull troops out of Afghanistan. Bring them back. If you want to support the troops, bring them home, Mr. President. That is the best thing you can do for them. Not a parade in Washington, D.C. or whatever else you had planned for the military. I know that you've boasted about funding the military on time and all these different things that you plan on doing for the military. You want to do that parade. You wanted to do some other things. No, just bring them back home. Get them out of the Middle East. That is the best thing you can do for them. NBC News reported on December 20th that the president has asked the Pentagon to begin drawing up plans for a troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. It said that no decision has been made, but according to NBC News, the president wants to see what are his options as far as bringing the troops out of that country. Now, all the concern with this is, obviously, what is going to happen after the United States leaves Syria and leaves Afghanistan. And there are some talks that, well, somehow Russia fits into this, but then again, Russia fits into everything with Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't sneeze without the Russians being blamed for it. But one legitimate concern with this is, what is this going to mean as far as ISIS in Syria and the Taliban in Afghanistan? Does this mean that pulling out of Syria, ISIS is going to regroup and then make a run and try to take over Syria? Will the Taliban do the same? Will they retake the government in Afghanistan and rise back to power like they were before we toppled them from power in 2001? I don't have an answer on that. Maybe, maybe not, but we can't stay there. I understand that our presence means that there is, stability in those countries. Of course, Syria is in a civil war, and Afghanistan has been trying to. The Afghan government has been in a war with the Taliban, but we cannot stay there. We cannot stay over there. It's too expensive, and we're not accomplishing our goals over there. I mean, if our goal is to completely wipe out ISIS, that's not going to happen. You cannot fight ISIS conventionally, first of all, and they're going to scatter, they're going to disperse, and then they're going to wait for their moment, and then they're going to regroup, and then they're going to resume. This is ISIS. It's not a conventional military. As far as the Taliban, Afghanistan and the United States have both considered holding peace talks with the Taliban. I guess we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. I'm not sure. But the bottom line here is that we can't stay over there. We need to pull out, and we need to do it now. 17 years, and we're still in Afghanistan. We've been in Syria for several years, and if we don't pull out of Syria now, who knows when we're going to pull out of Syria. But that is one thing to look forward to when the calendar turns to 2019 is when this withdrawal from the Middle East is going to happen. And if it even does happen, Mattis has resigned. He has made the decision to resign, and he's going to retire at the end of February. And this comes around the same time that Trump said he wants to pull troops out of Syria. So it's looking like those two are connected. So I think the pulling troops out of Syria is going to happen. Another bit of news, and this has been pretty entertaining this week, a Purple Heart recipient who is also a triple amputee started a GoFundMe to raise money for the wall. Since the government is not able to secure the funding necessary to build this wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, now it appears that people are trying to take matters into their own hands and raise money for this. Now, the last I checked was that GoFundMe's limit is at $1 billion. The wall is obviously going to cost more than $1 billion. I read that the person who started this said that they were talking with GoFundMe to try to get that limit changed. But as of Friday afternoon, they had raised more than $11 million, which is insane. People adamant about getting this wall built are raising the money themselves. And you know what? You can laugh at this all you want, but this really does prove a point when you think about it. It proves the point, and I know this is kind of like a cheap meme talking point, but it proves the point that if people do want something bad enough, they will figure out a way to get the money for it. This is something that voluntarists have said so many times, is that if something is necessary enough, people will, in fact, pay for it. Even if it's a government service, if it's something that's paid for with taxes, even if it wasn't paid for with taxes and people still wanted it, they would find a way to pay for it. And you're seeing that right now with this wall. But also at the same time, like I said, they had raised over $11 million. Think about how many people could be helped with that much money. Think about, because there's one thing that people on the right talk about a lot, especially when it comes to immigration. They talk about we should stop helping illegal immigrants and help our homeless vets. Well, you're all raising money. You've raised over $11 million. How many homeless vets could you help with $11 million? And that was as of Friday afternoon. I'm sure it's gone up way past that by the time you're listening to this episode. But that's just something to think about. You complain about the government not helping certain groups around the country. Well, you're raising a lot of money. You're all coming together for a cause instead of the cause being this wall, because getting that wall up is a lot more complicated than people probably think, especially when you have to consider that there are areas of private land along the border that they would either have to get that land through eminent domain or some other way to have the ability to put that wall up in those areas. Not to mention that there are going to be a lot of legal fights that come along with getting this wall up. So getting the wall up is really not that simple, but you're all coming together raising money. If you're worried about homeless vets, if you're worried about anything else pertaining to veterans, raise that money and use it for the veterans. People complain all the time about how the government doesn't do this, the government doesn't do that. Well, at some point, people are going to figure out you don't need the government to do a lot of these things that you're complaining about. But I personally would like to see that happen, all this money being raised, if it's used to help out veterans, to provide resources for veterans who maybe don't have access to certain things. Well, maybe all this money that's being raised could be used for that. I would be very happy to see that. And maybe after the start of the year, we will see that, and we will see how long this government shutdown, like I said, if it happens, how long that's going to last. And come the start of January, there's going to be a lot more headlines, plenty more news cycles to talk about. Once again, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, a very happy and safe New Year, and I will see all of you in 2019. Thank you so much for listening to the Liberty Ginger podcast. Like I said, this is episode number 10. You can find the Liberty Ginger podcast as part of the Think Liberty Network. You can find the Think Liberty Network at most places where podcasts are hosted, to include Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. And like I've said before, if there's some place where the Think Liberty Network is not hosted, let us know, and we will get all of the podcasts with that network onto the platform that we think where we need to be. Happy New Year, everyone. Merry Christmas. And I will see you all in 2019.